Okay, it is Tuesday, July 16th, 2019. I'm Justin Gary interviewing paralegal Dorothy Walls. In the room with me is Roy DeBerry, Caleb Hall, Morgan Cuterini, Dayton Shigag, Dylan McCullough, Ryan Parrish, Sarah Tucker, Jeannie Kilgore, and Alexis Miller. All right, so Ms. Walls, we're going to start with you. Why don't you tell us again who you are and where you grew up?
Yes, I'm Dorothy Walls. I actually grew up in two counties. I was born in Yazoo County and remained there until I was 16, and we moved to Holmes County, and I finished high school in Holmes County. I left Holmes County after my senior year. I went to Jackson State, and I attended until I became a senior, and then I was married, and I transferred to the University of Mississippi, where my husband was in law school at the time.
So you've pretty much been a native from the Mississippi Delta then?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So what was it like growing up here?
Actually, well, I came from a very large family, so it was pretty interesting. A lot of the things that a lot of people experience, I don't think I experienced at first because I was pretty sheltered. Although when I was like 7, Emmett Till was killed, and my father came home with the pictures, and that sort of started time for me. After that, everything that really happened that was related, I can almost remember, and I can chronicle from the age of 7, and I'm 71. So, like I said, it was pretty sheltered. We were sharecroppers, and of course we had to work. That was, the norm. That's just what we did, because we had to survive. And by the time I was 16, I began to go to Chicago to work and earn money, and then I did it until I was 20, and I decided that wasn't the place for me. Of course, I was still in school at Jackson State. I would just go there in the summer and then return to Jackson State. But by the time I was 20, I decided that I would try to work on campus, and I went to work in the Alumni Affairs office for Hilliard Lackey, who is still at Jackson State today. And then I worked in that office until I was married. And then when I transferred to the University of Mississippi, I worked as a student, but basically at that time I was trying to finish up because I was already a senior, and I had missed a semester because I had been sick, and I was very desperate to graduate because my class had graduated in 70, and I was going to graduate. I was supposed to graduate in 7, but I didn't because I was sick. So I graduated January 71. Of course, I was in Oxford, and that was about 4 years after the inception of legal services there. So I came in contact with legal services right off the bat. And my husband was a student. He was working for legal services. When he graduated, he became the managing attorney for legal services here in Greenwood. And so we remained here for about 4 years. He was still managing attorney with legal services, and we had a lot of fun doing a lot of work here. Because I was a sociology and history major, the things that legal services did was connected to what I had studied and what I knew, and so I was always involved from the beginning. As a matter of fact, one of the first really big cases that legal services did was the Ayers case, and I became the administrative assistant. But before Ayers was filed, we organized a group called the Black Mississippians Council on Higher Education, and what we did was we studied the higher education system in the state of Mississippi, and then we made decisions about what we needed to do to desegregate the institution of higher learning. Of course, Black Mississippians Council consisted of a lot of lawyers, so we didn't have to worry about trying to hire someone to do this. Those lawyers all pitched in. They did the research, they filed the case, and as they left legal services, the case fell to legal services, so a legal services lawyer continued to carry it on. That was Avenel Chambliss.
Have there really been anything like that before in Mississippi?
No, there was nothing like that before. What legal services did to me, it was an instrument for social change. It gave the people a voice and an opportunity to do things that they had never done before, that they had never imagined doing before. And these things had the tendency to impact social, economic, health, everything that affected the people. There had never been anything. And it was so exciting because, here I come from a farm. I couldn't imagine that. I had never met a lawyer before I had gone to college. And this was just really exciting. And the first experience I had with legal services, like I said, was in Oxford. And there was a concert called Up With People. They came, and they were a protest group. They sang protest songs. If you look them up, you probably never heard of them. But most of the students, the black students, a lot of black students went to the concert that evening. I did not go because I was studying, and then I was married, and I was cooking and whatever, and I didn't go. But my husband had gone, and his friends had gone. Everybody had gone. But they had intended to protest when they sang a certain song. But the word got out some kind of way. So the Highway Patrol, all the policemen in Oxford and everywhere else was there. And so when they got up to get on that stage, they arrested everybody. Took them straight to jail. And no hearing, nothing. You just go straight to jail. And John Britton was an attorney with legal services at the time. So it was his duty, and he was basically alone to go and try to get all of these students out of jail. They got to get back to school, so you got to get them out of jail. So John was able to do that, and that was, to me, a tremendous feat, and it took a lot of strength. If you had known John, he's about, he's just a little guy. And he's probably still teaching at some law school today. I don't know, Jenny might know. But anyway, that was my first real experience with, the power that the law could have, and they could do it. And then when I came to Greenwood, and Greenwood was ripe for some of everything, because a lot of things had happened here.
What type of things happened?
Well, it was a lot of discrimination. It was a lot of, I would say, violence. As a matter of fact, we came in contact with that. There was a person who lived next door to us. She had a son, and I don't know what he had done, but anyway, he was jailed. And she came to the house that evening, and she said, I need you to go. She wasn't talking to me, she was talking to my husband. I need you to go and try to get him out. And Willie Bailey, who's an attorney who serves in the legislature now, he was also at legal services at the time. And the two of them proceeded to go to get young man out of jail. Willie's a very tall, imposing man, so with a voice to go with it. So he wasn't taking any mess. And they were trying to talk down to him, and he was getting back with them. And, of course, they would get ready to kill him. And the woman told me, she said, I've never been so scared in all my life. She said, I got all down on the floor, I begged. She said, for them not to do anything to them. And so they managed to get up out of there. And when they got up out of there, they sued the Greenwood Police Department for police brutality, and won. There were no black people in the bank when I came here.
So around the time that they decided to sue the police department,
Mm-hmm.
so there's like a small group of black who literally decided they wanted to
It's
sue.
two
Two black.
men.
Okay.
2 lawyers.
2 lawyers that decided to sue the entire police department.
Uh-huh.
What was the atmosphere like here when that happened?
Well, actually, we were young, and we were oblivious to a lot of things that, people were saying and doing. We just did what we needed to do.
Mm.
And, I mean, if somebody said anything, we might have heard it, but we just kept on going. Just kept on going. I caught a lot of the flack because, see, he was a lawyer, and he could keep them off of him. But when I would apply for jobs, invariably, I was not going to get hired. The first job I applied for was a job with the Department of Public Welfare. Of course, they didn't have any black people working there either. And I kept going to apply over and over again, and she kept reading the Hatch Act to me. And I said, this woman is not, she's not serious. She's not going to hire me. So I went home, and I told my husband. Well, he knew another friend who was here as a private attorney, Andrew Marlowe Gambrell. And his wife had tried to do the same thing, and they had done her the same way. So we just decided that we just filed us a charge with EOC, and that's what we did.
Yeah, what's EOC?
Huh?
What's EOC?
Equal Employment Opportunity.
Okay.
We filed a charge, both of us. And we got a lady, her name was James Sample. She said, she was the investigator for them. She said, I've been waiting for this. So she investigated, and she gave us a right to sue right away. And of course, my husband sued the Department of Public Welfare on behalf of the 2 of us, but there were 3 other women in this town who it had happened to them. We didn't know them, but when we talked about it, they came forth. It was 3 or 4, but anyway, they were from Greenwood. We weren't, and we all sued them. Then once we sued them, it became a class action suit because we figured out that all over the state they were not hiring black people, and so it ended up being a class of about probably 800. So that case went on for probably 20 years or more. I was 23, probably 40-something when it was finally finished. Every governor that came after we filed that suit was the defendant, all the way up. And finally, well, after I left here, in 74, we moved to Greenville, and at that time they were trying to show good faith, so they sent someone to ask me if I still wanted to work with the welfare department, and I told them that I did. And so then I went to work for the welfare department, but I didn't like it because I didn't like the fact that black parents were treated different. I ultimately became a social worker, and so I really got a chance to see all the dirty stuff that they did. If a black person couldn't pay their utilities, their children could be removed for something like that. But white parents weren't. I was going to be a part of that. So that was when I left and went to work with legal services. We didn't have a legal services there at the time. Wilhelm Joseph was the director. And so I asked Wilhelm if he thought about opening an office in Greenville, and he said he did, but he needed a survey. So he gave me a survey, and I gave it to another girl, and the 2 of us, we walked the streets of Greenville. We surveyed Greenville. They said that they wanted it, and he opened an office there. And the Ayers case that I started to work on here ended up in our office there. And so that's when I started to actually work for legal services. But all those years leading up to that, I was just connected through my husband and other people.
So stepping back to when you said when you were younger, around the time Emmett Till was killed.
Mm-hmm.
So you said you found this out from the papers?
Yeah, my dad had brought a magazine. It was in Jet Magazine. You know what Jet Magazine?
Jet Magazine.
Yeah.
Okay.
And he brought it home. My dad was not literate, but he brought it home for me to read, and I read it, but the thing that got me was the picture. There was a picture, he was on like about 15, 16, And it was a picture of him when he was that age, but it was the picture of him there when they brought him up out of the river. And the picture that I saw when they brought him up out of the river, it was so drastically different. He looked like he was 80 years old. So this is astounding, and I'm thinking like, how could this happen? He's just a boy. And then from that on, it was something all the time. I mean, you were hearing things like when the 3 civil rights guys were killed, because we weren't all that far. We lived in Holmes County, so if you know the geography of Mississippi, you don't have to go more than an hour or so before you almost in any of these places. So it's not very far from you. So you get to know, or you hear, what is going on. So then it was them, and then it was Meg Evers and Reverend Lee, and it was something all through my childhood. And I recognized those things and understood what they were. And then it came up to around the time that the Civil Rights Bill was passed, and really thought that there was going to be a lot of really permanent changes. But it was a backlash. The people that you thought that really were going to be for the changes, they backlashed. There was a congressman at the time, can't think of his name, and he said, what the Negro needs is a little benign neglect after that bill was passed. Because Lyndon Baines Johnson had it right. He knew what it took to change the conditions of black people. And he had dealt with or someone that he was involved with had dealt with this writer named Michael Harrington. He did a book, and it's only probably this big, called The Other America. And he lays out what needs to be done if African Americans are to catch up with the rest of society. He said something like, if you know where Leland is, you probably don't, but if there's a group already in Leland, and then there's a group over there by the Mississippi Levee in Greenville, where I live, you're going to have to do something very special for those people at the levee in Greenville to catch those people in Leland. And that was what he had tried to do with the Civil Rights Act, and legal services was a part of it. Legal services was under OEO. It wasn't Legal Services Corporation at the time. When legal services started out in 1964, whatever, it was a part of OEO, Employment Opportunity Commission, whatever that was. And the presidents coming about at that time decided that they were going to interfere, because legal services had activist lawyers. They didn't have folks that just sat at their desk and waited for somebody to come in to do something. These people were actually about advocating for change. They were getting out, seeing people, finding out what people's needs were, and deciding what they were going to do about them. And they didn't like it. So they began to interfere with the original legal services. So then that was when Congress decided to pass a bill to do the Legal Services Corporation, so they wouldn't have that type of interference.
What type of interference was it exactly?
They would try to prevent them from getting the funding that they needed, That was the main interference. When you don't have money, we still don't have the money we should. It's never gotten back to the level of funding that it should be even now. I thought that under the Obama administration, we would, since he was a lawyer, his wife was a lawyer, they would understand that legal services needed to be put back to where, or it needed to transcend that, because we have more problems now than we had then. In order for people to be able to get beyond oppression you got to be able to have the law, and you got to be able to use it the way you need to use it. And you got to have somebody to, it's got to be a tool. The law can change poverty. It really can. It can change many of the social problems that we have if it is used properly. But by the time Reagan was president, the damage was really beginning because he hated legal services, because legal services was always suing when he was governor of the state of California. And he vowed to eradicate it, but he wasn't able to after they did the corporation, because the president really wouldn't have the power to deal with the Congress did. But it's still, Congress never, to me, gave it the that it had from the beginning. But it needed more. See, it should have continued to have grown financially so that it can hire the best. And I would say that from the beginning, it had some of the best lawyers, and it's turned out some of the best lawyers anywhere in the country, in the state and in the country. Very, very competent and very smart people who didn't get paid. You know, I think my husband was making maybe $6,000 when he started. Well, there's no money.
So $6,000 a year?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
But, you know, they were committed to what they were doing, and they never complained. We just needed to do the work, you know.
So what made you really want to get started then with legal services? What promoted you to do that?
Like I said, I already had the background,
Mm-hmm.
and I had already been exposed. And I knew that the people in Greenville needed the assistance. They needed to be able to deal with certain, see, legal services, if you just do the administrative part, Social Security, welfare, veterans, housing, consumer, if you do that, you make a great impact. And Greenville needed that. We had, at the time, another organization that dealt with the economics, and that was Mississippi Action for Community Education and Delta Foundation, run by a young, he was young at the time, named Charles Bannerman. So he was already doing some things, but they didn't do the legal part of it. And that's what legal services in Greenville could do. But by the time we opened the office, I think in 1978, we were still pretty active because Wilhelm was still our director, and he's with Maryland Legal Services now, I think. Yeah, he is. He was a very active, vociferous, very strong man, and he really carried North Mississippi far. In fact, you could go anywhere in the country at the time, and if you said you were from North Mississippi, oh, you were recognized because of the kind of work that we were doing. Mm-hmm. And the country knew about it.
So were there any major cases that you took that you remember?
Major cases that I took? Well, see, I'm a paralegal, so basically I would do intake. And the administrative cases that I would do would be legal service, Social Security. One of the main cases that I took is, remember, a young lady was the daughter. She was what they call illegitimate, and her father had never. He acknowledged her. He did and he didn't. He did and he didn't. His mother and his sister acknowledged her. But he left after she was born. He was from Greenville, and he went up north, and so he really, really never had anything to do with it. But he died, and she applied for his benefits. And the judge wanted her to take, he wanted to do a DNA so that he could prove, so he said, to prove whether she was the daughter. And I refused because that wasn't what was required.
Mm-hmm.
So we ended up losing, and then we ended up appealing to the appeals council and ultimately won her benefits. There were numerous, things like that. And a lot of times with administrative cases, what you have to make sure is that you know what the rule is and you're not frightened, and you're going to persist, and you're going to do it the way you know and the way you are trained to do it. Because if you let them strong arm you, then you're going to lose. You might lose anyway. But if you stick to the rule, a lot of times you will win, even when it doesn't seem winnable. So
was it challenging to do that?
Yeah, because the judges, they can be threatening. I remember I had a case one time. The claimant was in Ohio when she was supposed to be in Mississippi, but she had gone to visit her daughter, and it was in wintertime. And she couldn't make it back. And they wanted to have the hearing in her absence, and I didn't want it. And so what they did was they caved, because I wouldn't agree for them to go on anyway without her, and they went on and gave her benefits in her absence. But if I had just caved in and say I couldn't testify for her, I didn't know her I did know her impairments, but I wasn't the impaired. It was her. She needed to testify. I didn't need to testify. I needed to question her, and she wasn't there. But he just said, "Okay, Ms. Walls, I think we have enough," and he went on and ruled for her. I had a lot of resistance with that too, because they could be very disrespectful to the claimants.
Disrespectful how?
Talking to them in a disrespectful way, talking loud to them. Why you saying this, and why you acting? If they start to cry or whatever, why are you crying? As a matter of fact, there was a man who worked with legal services, and he became a judge. And I thought, surely you're supposed to know better. And my client is there. She's been shot in her eye, and she started to cry when I started to question about how she got shot. And of course, it was domestic violence. And at that time, people were not proponents like they are now. And what are you crying about? And I said, well, Judge, if someone shot you in your eye, I think you might be crying too. Oh, wait a minute, Walls. Wait a minute. And he hurried up and cut it off, because he knew I wasn't going to stand for him abusing my claimant. She had feelings. She had been traumatized, and she had a right to cry if she wanted to, if she felt like it. So you had to really be sturdy, and you had to believe in what you believed in, because if you didn't, they were going to carry you with the waves. You were going to go with the waves. Just go on.
Do you face any backlash just talking like that sometimes to a judge?
Yeah.
What type of backlash you face?
What
for you specifically, like?
Losing my cases. That's how they get you.
So it never once deterred you in any way?
No.
You feel it's still like that today?
Yes.
How so?
Well, today it's still like that, but they are gentler with it. They don't approve very many people, no matter what you do. And I really don't understand why we're not getting, even with legal services, we're not getting more cases carried through federal court, because that's what they need. They need to be knocked on it, go on through the process. Go on to federal court. If you have to, go to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. Those cases can go to the Supreme Court just like other cases. Because we have a lot of very poor, sick people in the Delta, and they get denied a lot. And a lot of that is to discourage and put a chilling effect on representation, because you only get paid if you win. And so if you deny all the claimants, then the reps don't win. And if the reps don't win, then a lot of them will withdraw, you know?
So do you feel like the changes that's happened to legal services over time, do you think that might be one reason why
Or
the
me-
cases don't go that far?
No. Excuse me. I think that they're not as tenacious. You have to be really, really tenacious. The law is very hard. You can see most lawyers, but Jenny, they are gray-headed. You know, they gray very early because it's really hard work. And people, I think, now don't want to work that hard. You have to have the passion in the first place to do it. And they don't have the passion. Because to me, they could do a lot filing those cases in court. And however long it takes, just go on with it. That's what it takes.
So think about all the issues today. Let's just ask this since we're on that. Like Ferguson, for example. Like the way that some blacks feel they either feel about police and things like that. Do you feel that maybe because that drive isn't there, maybe that's why this is more common? Or do you feel that maybe you need more legal services to help combat that?
Well, see, first of all, legal services is limited. They don't do certain things. If it's got criminal stuff in it, they don't do that. They could never do that. Well, of course, some people did it because they did what they wanted to do. But this was back in the day, and they were taking chances, and they didn't care. You know, I guess if they said, if you want to fire me for doing this, then you just fire me, and I just go on because I got a law degree anyway, and I can go someplace else. But people don't take chances anymore the way they used to.
So you individual, like since you started working with legal services, since the cases you started taking, how do you think that's affected you?
When I was younger, you know, it was easier to blow it off. But now it's much more, there's stress involved. Because I really know, you know, the significance of denial for the people. And I see a lot of it. You know, I really am more, when you're young, you know, you can blow a lot of things off. You don't internalize things as much. But I'm older now. And so I know the significance of, say, a child who has asthma. You got asthma, then you got ADHD, you got a speech impediment, then you got a poor mother. I know what that means. That means that mother, she's stressed out all the time because she's trying to provide all of these, for all these healthcare needs that the child has. She got to feed the child. You know, you got to pay the rent. And then you going to work, and them people dragging on you every day, telling you got to come to work, you can't miss work. You can't take that child to the doctor every week to take the injections that they have to have for whatever. And I know what that means now. When I was younger, I knew that it was wrong. But now I know it's wrong, and I know what it means.
So legal services never existed. How do you think Mississippi will be today? Like this whole area, you think it would be any different? You think it would be worse?
I think it would be worse because the kind of tenacity and the kind of practice that the legal services brought about, they made the good old boys get off the seat. See, they were making deals. They didn't really practice law the way they do now. But when those young guys came out and did what they did, that changed everybody. People changed. You might want to do some of the other side sometime and see how they felt after coming in contact with some of the lawyers and give them the names, and they will tell you.
You feel that legal services left a legacy then?
Oh God, yes.
What type of legacy do you think they left?
It was a legacy of voice, of giving people voice and making people feel empowered so that they could be able to do things, and if they did them, they got somebody to stand. Because a lot of the lawyers that work for legal services were followed by people when, they have other problems other than the problems that legal services can handle, and they end up following them and using them to assist them in those kind of things. Say when you accused of murder, there's a man. He was a mayor in Chula, Mississippi, named Eddie Carthan. Well, after my husband left legal services, we ended up in Greenwood, and Eddie Carthan was the mayor, and he was having these difficulties with his city council, and it was one particular man that he had difficulty with. The man was a teacher. He was on the council, and he ran like a quick stop in the evening after school, I guess. And so one night, somebody went in there and they put all the women workers in the freezers, and they killed him. His name was Granderson. And they said that Eddie Carthan, the mayor of Chula, had it done. And so then he was accused of murder. And so he came to my husband to represent him. You can read about that case too. It's a very significant case because a lot of people were, even though they had been through the fire, they stood off from him. They didn't want to connect with that kind of thing. And Johnny represented him. And he got a lot of support from all over the nation. Amnesty International, people from everywhere came to Mississippi to work on that case to make sure that Eddie Carthan got justice. And he got off. But that has followed him. And they are still, 30-some years later, trying to do him in. He ran for supervisor 3 or 4 years ago, was elected somewhere this year. I guess might have started last year, but this is when I found out about it. They are saying that he was a convicted felon, and a convicted felon can't hold a public office. And he should pay back all of the money that he's earned since he's been on the board of supervisors, or they're going to prosecute him. And that's happening right now. And of course, my husband is sick and he can't, won't be able to do anything for him. I don't know who's handling it. But that was the kind of thing that the people that came out of legal services still ended up doing. Edward Blackman was one of the people in legal services. He stayed a long time. But he ended up being in the legislature as well, and a great tort lawyer, and he still practices. He's in Canton, Mississippi today. So legal services at the time provided a training ground for the future. And those lawyers went on to do great things to impact the state of Mississippi. A lot of them ended up in private practice and then serving as judges in the legislature. You can't do any better than that. So legal services was very fruitful.
So how do you view the future of legal services then?
I don't know, because I'm not seeing what I want to see. I'm not seeing the activism. I'm not seeing the people who want to meet the challenges of today. You got to step out on it. You got to recognize what is and deal with it. And I'm not seeing that.
You think they will?
I don't know. I'm just not clear on that yet.
Ms. Jen, you got any questions? So if you could leave one message then left for, say, like my generation is coming up, or everything that you've experienced, what would that be?
My message would be for you to be tenacious, for you to have insight into what is going on and understanding and apply all of that. Only if you do that will we succeed. You've got to do that. Insight, understanding, apply it. You need the passion. You've got to do it.